We've done Mayo, we've done Cork. Bit of contention about both of them so far, but poor Will is the first time who's actually had to come out and have his judged essentially by somebody who is, quite well versed on all things history. Paul Rouse is also with us this morning. So, Will, this must be the most intimidating thing you've ever done in your life, right?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ger and Tommy and the rest of the team. When I was picking my shortlist yesterday, I kind of got it down to 16. Then I kind of worried slightly I'd left some people out, so I put it back out to 20. I'm thinking I got to get this back down to 4. And then I get a message from Tommy Rooney, your producer, last night saying, you know what, we're going to put Paul Rouse on the line, who probably knows more about the sporting history of Offaly than anybody, and my former lecturer in college as well. And he's going to probably pick apart your selection. So, yeah, no pressure whatsoever.
Great. Paul, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Good morning, Ger. Good morning, Will.
How far back did you go, as a matter of interest, before we get Will's list? Are you going back to like the mid-1500s here?
I operated on the... no, I'm not going back to the mid-1500s. I operated on the view that I had to have seen the person play. That was... I did it in my lifespan, and I'm 50 this summer, so I took it over the last 50 years.
Okay, that's actually a good way of doing it, because there's been a bit of debate about like whether or not... So there was a big dispute in Mayo about whether or not the Mayo man who emigrated to America, who won loads of Olympic golds, was actually better than, say, Kevin Kilbane.
That would be the Mayo man who was the champion athlete at 2 Olympic Games, who held world records for years, who came home to Mayo regularly. Would that be the Mayo man you're talking about?
Yeah, that Nathan didn't know, hadn't heard about, and decided wasn't worthy of consideration. So I'm here for the Mayo bashing, but let's get on to the Will bashing. Will, who have you got for us? How did you whittle the list down? What were your criteria?
So, yeah, I kind of went similarly down the same line as Paul. So I kind of started from the front, where I had a fair idea of my 4 or at least down to 5 major contenders to go on at the start of last week when we started to think about this for the first time. Then yesterday, I kind of broke it out a bit and tried to think outside maybe my own recency bias, because the people I'm selecting are all from the last 30 years. So again, from inside my lifetime. Decided to just put a couple in just to kind of spark a little bit of debate yesterday as well. Someone I hadn't seen, but I wanted to put in just for like an absolute outlier in all this, was the greyhound Mick the Miller, who's known as probably the greatest greyhound in the history of Irish or English greyhound racing. And he had won all the classics, broke 6 world records during his career, first dog ever to win back-to-back English derbies, went on to do the full run of the classics, only dog to ever win all 3, was the first ever dog to go sub 30 seconds, do the 525 yards as well. And there is a bronze statue of him in his hometown of Killy. And not all of the athletes that we're going to mention have their own statues in their town. So I decided to just put that out there to kind of spark debate. A lot of people are like, you cannot put a dog onto Mount Rushmore when you've got so many options. I think understandably they're probably right.
I like the way you're thinking.
But in terms of, I guess, trying to break it down into the... Yeah, but like trying to break it down into the 4. I mean, very obviously, like Gaelic games is huge tradition within the county of Offaly. The first county to ever have a player in every position on the All-Stars in both football and hurling. So we could easily have picked a 20 of just hurlers, even from the 1990s and 80s hurling teams, or maybe pick 20 players from the 1970s and 80s Gaelic football teams, and easily have made a shortlist just from that. So I tried to kind of think outside of that. There's a few others that are kind of interesting when you try and take, say, international achievements into account in this as well. Because they're, outside of obviously just a national basis. And you look at Susan Moran, who I know Kieran Shannon has been pushing hard to get onto Mount Rushmore here. And like Sue, just a remarkable athlete, scored over 50 points in 2 All-Ireland basketball finals at the schools level for Tullamore College. Ended up going to St. Joseph's in Philadelphia, went on there to be the 4th top scorer in the NCAA Division 1 in basketball. So he's playing at the very highest level, and was the first ever Irish athlete to be drafted directly into the NBA on graduation. She went to the New York Liberty, played in the women's NBA, and then towards the tail end of her career, went around the globe and played in New Zealand, played in Australia, played in Europe, and captained the Irish international team as well, and is widely considered to be the best ever female Irish basketball player. So there is kind of that risk when you look at Offaly, you look directly at hurling and football, and maybe miss some of these other options that we have along the way. I mean, from a purely international level then as well, you've got Pat Smullen, 9-time champion jockey, fantastic record at Royal Ascot, with Harzand in the Derby in 2016. And then tremendously take what he's done outside of the sport as well. Since he was forced into retirement after his 2 bouts of pancreatic cancer, he's raised €2.5 million for cancer trials over the last year as well. So I think that's something you have to take into consideration as well. I tried to weight this largely towards sporting achievement, but I think what makes the sports star an icon is also important to consider when we're picking our final 4 for Mount Rushmore, which I'm saying is going to be the side of Cron Hill in County Offaly.
Why Cron Hill? Explain that to us. for the non-Offaly people?
It's a pretty flat county. I mean, quite aside from maybe the Escarita going through, there's very few actual mountainous areas where we can actually have a Mount Rushmore. And we saw the tremendous picture that James Crombie took last week of the pink moon with someone hurling on the top of Cron Hill. So from that point of view, I think it makes perfect sense. Plus, I think particularly the football teams, Eugene McGee particularly was a big fan of running the players up and down Cron Hill as well. So it seems very fitting that it fits right into Offaly sporting tradition as well.
Okay, before we get to your takedown or interest in exactly what Will's saying here, was there anywhere specific that is actually the heartland, Paul, of where Offaly sport comes from? Is there an automatic site that you think that makes sense?
Well, the point about Cron Hill is well made. It's from that point that we kind of survey and look down on the people of Kildare and Westmeath from a vantage point of our greatness. I think that's so. It could not have been better chosen as a location for these faces. No, the Offaly is united by a green, white and gold jersey in terms of Gaelic football and hurling, but apart from that, it is an entirely divided county. It sprawls across different Catholic dioceses, different Protestant dioceses. It has different administrative divisions. There are people who Offaly's almost like two Leitrim's in terms of there's the football at the north end of the county and there's the hurling at the south end. And I know that has changed, and people will come out and say, well, we have a whole lot of players from the north of the county now who are hurling and players from the south who play football. Yes, that's absolutely true. But the predominant clubs in both codes come from either areas of the county. And I think so there is no one area that you can pick here that says this is the dominant sporting area. But I would suspect that when our lists are compared, that the geographical bias between myself and Will, me being from the Tullamore area and Will being from the south of the county, will be fairly stark and revealing. Yeah,
I think Will might have been toadying up to you, I believe is the official phrase, when he was talking about Susan Moore in there, because you didn't make her list, Will. Who is on your list? You tell us about this amazing athlete and then you're like, no, not good enough for me. So who's on your list, Will?
Right, so you want my final four then? Anyone who wants to read the 20, by the way, before I get accused of leaving anyone out, have a look at offtheball.com where I did the kind of long list yesterday. But okay, my first submission then onto the final four then will be Matt Connor, because Matt Connor is the best ever Gaelic footballer that Offaly have ever produced. Like, quite a remarkable scoring record if you want to break it down into just pure numbers. 38 goals and 383 points scored across his career. In the championship in 1980, in 4 championship games, he scored 5 goals and 31 points, including 2-9 in the defeat to Kerry in the semi-finals. He had only recently turned 20 at the time. He went on to be a star player going right through to that 1982 team. I know everyone remembers Seamus Darby, and I also long-listed Martin Furlong in this as well for the longevity of his career and the importance of that penalty save from Mikey Sheehy in the final as well. But it's what people kind of even would have said of Matt Connor afterwards. Like Mick O'Dwyer said that one of the only good things that came from Kerry losing the 5 in a row was that Matt Connor got an All-Ireland medal. Eugene McGee said that Offaly wouldn't have even been in All-Ireland contention if they didn't have the individual genius of Matt at the time. Like, Matt is a player who would quite easily fit into modern football at the moment. Every time I see David Clifford, it reminds me of videos I would have seen as a child growing up watching Matt Connor in these big games. And he was a big game performer as well. Remarkably two-footed, which made him very difficult to defend against. Players, oftentimes you'll see the videos, particularly of the series of games that Offaly had against Kerry in the early 80s. They didn't know to show him back into his left foot because he would do a dummy, turn back onto his right and bend it over with the outside of his right foot. That's the kind of skill that he had. A tremendously direct runner at goal as well, and always seemed to have a goal on his mind when he got anywhere near goal as well. And in that semi-final in 1980, he scored his goals, absolute rockets with either foot, one with his left, one with his right. Just an incredible footballer to watch on a purely aesthetic level as well. So I think there's no way that you can't have this GAA Hall of Fame member in our final four.
Okay, I think he also gets helped by the fact that they were the coolest jerseys that any GAA team has ever worn. He comes from an era where it just looks amazing. Paul, is he your Gaelic footballer on your list?
No, he's not. He's not my Gaelic footballer on my list. And Matt Connor, I agree with everything that Will has said there, that Matt Connor was the greatest Gaelic footballer that Offaly has produced. He's certainly the greatest that I ever saw. He is an outstanding player. But I went with Martin Furlong on the grounds that Martin Furlong played senior football for Offaly from 1966 until 1985. No Offaly team has ever won an All-Ireland football championship without Martin Furlong being in the goals. When before that, Offaly won its first ever All-Ireland minor championship with Martin Furlong in the goals in 1964, making an unbelievable save against Cork to win them that championship. In 82, he made, everyone talks about Seamus Darby's goal, and rightly so, but Martin Furlong saved the penalty from Mikey Sheehy before that, and had I think what's euphemistically called a coming together with Owen Liston in the first half, which is worth watching on the video, apart from anything else, not least because Owen Liston is a huge man and Martin Furlong is only 5'9", 5'10", and in 1982, for like Matt, again, it's really hard to argue against Matt Connor, but Martin Furlong was Footballer of the Year, the first goalkeeper and the only one before Stephen Cluxton become Goalkeeper of the Year, which he was awarded or not Goalkeeper of the Year, Footballer of the Year in 1982, and I think that has to matter. And in Tullamore Club, he won 3 championships for the footballers, often playing centre forward for that team, so he was able to play outfield as well. He hurled for Tullamore at a very high level. So it's Martin Furlong, and for me.
All right, so local bias absolutely matters when it comes to this.
Yeah, well, it may be my club. So, yes, of course. But like, this isn't a science, right? Obviously, this is something that's based on whim and opinion, as we've seen to some extent within the dimensions of having a plausible argument. Will has a plausible argument. It's obviously I prefer my argument, but Will, I like Matt Connor. I saw Matt Connor score 4-5 against Dunlavin in the Wicklow in the Leinster Senior Football Championship in the second half of the game. I saw him score 4 goals in the second half of a challenge match against Laois in things, and he didn't even look like he was trying. That's the thing about Matt Connor. He looks like he wasn't moving anywhere. He just looked like he wasn't bursting a gut. He just had so much time and space. I mean, an absolute genius.
Yeah, no, for sure. Okay, so Will, who's next? Are we just? Is everybody taking Shane Lowry is automatically on the Offaly Mount Rushmore? I assume that everybody thinks.
I think we have to, Ger. I mean, he is the outstanding candidate, and probably at this stage, after what happened at Royal Portrush last year, would have to be seen as Offaly's greatest ever sports person now as well. Just when you take, as I mentioned, kind of the international aspect to what he's achieved, doing so in a very elite international field, winning a major, which is just, I guess, a step above what anyone else has achieved. Shane Lowry as well, I think when it comes to quite outside of his talent, and over the last 10 years, he's given us so many interesting stories, like becoming the 3rd ever amateur to win on the European Tour, the first amateur to win the Irish Open in 2009 when he won at the Balltray, 15 under par after 2 rounds, had to scrap it out against Robert Rock after missing his putt in the 18th. He used to go down 3 playoff holes, play the 18th 3 more times and eventually wins it. Has to leave a cheque for £500,000 behind, which Robert Rock picked up because Lowry was an amateur. Goes on, retains his card when he was under pressure in Portugal in 2011, then goes on to win the WGC at Bridgestone, wins in Abu Dhabi to start off last year, and then remarkably goes on to cruise to victory in the end at the Open Championship and turn the claret jug into the claret jug. The fact that he is so loved as well, obviously that huge connection between his uncle and his dad being 2 of the great Offaly footballers who would have been in contention to get into this top 20 as well, particularly I suppose Shawnee Lowry, who had just a remarkable career, and then Shane has taken on that sporting prowess, and he's always at games as well. Like, you'll see him at Clara games in both hurling and football. You'll often see him at Offaly games as well. A huge kind of die-hard supporter, a guy who's very popular with people as well. I don't think there's anyone really who would, and I'll see if Paul can decide not to have Shane on the list, who wouldn't want Shane on this Mount Rushmore.
Well, notwithstanding the tensions between Tullamore and Clara, which manifest themselves all over the place, there is no arguing against Shane Lowry in my view. And the very fact of winning the Offaly, the very fact of winning the Irish Open as an amateur, just the absolute guts and bravery, courage, skill that he displayed on that day has been manifest throughout his career. He is like an outstanding international competitor. He's recognised all over the place, and rightly so. And I think there can be there's no arguing against him. I should say, by the way, it was his father and his 2 uncles were on the Offaly team in '82, and Sean Lowry, who won the All Ireland for Offaly 71, 72, and '82, then went on and won a Connacht Senior Football Championship with Mayo in '85, and probably must have been close enough to Nathan's list when it comes down to it.
Owen, you were very quiet there about the whole Kerry 5 in a row. Did you just the line dropped or something? Is that what happened?
Well, it's when you're listening to 2 unbelievably knowledgeable people talking about Offaly and knowledgeable people talking about 82, you've got to let them at it. Like, lads, how close does Seamus Darby come to either of your lists? Just because, in my view, he is the most famous Offaly footballer to ever exist. Martin Furlong and Matt Canner, of course, will be up there in terms of the greats of Offaly football. But in terms of the legacy of one footballer to be more famous than the others, it has to be Seamus Darby, does it not?
I suppose it depends how you define things. I was trying to do it over kind of the length of their career and trying to take maybe sporting achievements into it. Like, remarkable that Seamus Darby had come back in, got onto the panel in '82 and had that huge impact off the bench. As you say, from an iconic moment point of view, Seamus Darby would definitely be deserving of being on any Mount Rushmore. But it's difficult, like when you're trying to break that down against some of the other guys we were looking at, like Furlong, looking at, say, someone like Paddy McCormack, who was there throughout the late 50s, 60s, 70s on the 2 All-Ireland winning teams, would have played every position for Offaly as well. The likes of Willie Bryan and so on from that team. It's difficult to actually pick someone out, but I think, Paul, if you were going to put Seamus Darby on it, it would be just for, I guess, the enormity of the moment that he achieved.
It's the enormity of the moment, and it's the success. But Seamus Darby was a brilliant footballer who, for both Road and for Offaly, had more than a decade service with All Ireland in the early 70s. So he had a long career which had drifted away towards the end, and he came back in '82. And was, obviously, there's no All Ireland without Seamus Darby in 1982, and just a great footballer and a great servant to Offaly football. But even Seamus would not put himself in the same league as I think as the others.
Lads, what are we thinking hurling wise? Because this is where things get very interesting, I would have thought.
Well, if Paul's going to get a Tullamore man onto the list and Martin Furlong, I'm definitely getting a Burr man onto the list and Brian Whelan on this one. This is a difficult one because, like, the Offaly team of the 1990s particularly, I think, were pretty beloved, and there was lots of people who were probably in contention here. Like, Martin Hannamy is one of the best cornerbacks of all time. John Troy, just from a purely skill point of view, was just absolutely remarkable. Johnny Dooley was the other player that I put in my shortlist, in that, he was a 4-time All-Star across various different positions, scored the very important penalty to spark the 2-5 against Limerick in the last 5 minutes of the final in 1994. But I don't think anyone could argue that Brian Whelan was probably a cut above all the players in that period. Like, he won 8 All-Ireland medals between Burr and Offaly, between All-Ireland seniors, minors and All-Ireland club championships as well. He hurled into his early 40s. He had an over 22-year career across club and county. One of the most elegant defenders you will ever see, with just remarkable reading of the game as well. Like, one of the things about Whelan, it wasn't just that he was a tight marker, he was almost a playmaker out of the half-back line as well. And he was the only player to get selected on the team of the millennium who was an active player when that was picked in 2000. And I'd imagine he probably got in that team nearly purely on the basis of how he hurled a few months previously in the 1999 semi-final against Cork, which was probably Brian Whelan's best ever performance. When he's sick in 1998, he gets pushed up into the full forward line because he wasn't able for the running in the half-back line. He scores 1-6 from play in that final when Offaly beat Kilkenny, which just goes to show what he can do. And we went out to shoot an off-the-ball piece with Burr at the tail end of the summer last year, and we had 2 of the All-Ireland winning captains in Joe Erity and Johnny Pilkington. Brian Whelan, as will be his way, was the last man in, and he pulled a hurl that looked like it was from the 1700s out of the back of his van. There was only half a boss on the hurl because it was broken down the middle, and we were shooting some hurling sections, and Brian Whelan did not misplace any ball that went near him. He controlled every single one with half a hurl, which just goes to show at 49 years of age that he still has it as well. Brian Whelan's remarkable. First ever hurler to win the Hurler of the Year twice. He was an All-Star on 4 different occasions, and famously not an All-Star in the first year where he won Hurler of the Year, which resulted in him breaking his fist in the hotel at City West as well, because he was so annoyed that he didn't get an All-Star. So maybe that gives a mark of the kind of athlete we're talking about here and competitor. He was really annoyed. It was the time they had to actually change the All-Star system around Ger. He wasn't picked for an All-Star, and then after the way he hurled in the final in '94, he was picked as Hurler of the Year. He was so annoyed he went out to the toilet and he hit the door of the loo and broke his hand.
Wow. I mean, I knew that he hadn't been selected and had been Hurler of the Year, and it was a stain and continues to be a stain on the All-Star selectors to this day. But I didn't realise that, right, fair enough. So obviously these individual awards do matter, and he'll be delighted, obviously, this morning to be waking up to the news that Will O'Callaghan has put him on his Mount Rushmore. Is there a hurler, Paul, on your list?
There is a hurler on my list, and again, I suppose I reveal my age here as being significantly older than Will, and so I would like to give a nod as well to that team of the 80s, Offaly team of the 80s, who broke the mould by winning All Irelands in 81 and 85. And you must remember that Offaly was the first new county to win an All Ireland for a very long time at that stage, so it was a huge dam burst. And those players, there were outstanding players on the team, players such as Eugene Coughlin, Paddy Delaney, Johnny Flaherty, Mark Corrigan. Two Corrigans are unbelievable. Actually, Mark Corrigan, the day that Ireland played Egypt in the 1990 World Cup, Offaly played Kilkenny in the Leinster Hurling Championship at the same time in Croke Park. It was the smallest crowd ever, I'd say, at the Leinster Hurling semi-final. There was nobody there. Offaly hammered Kilkenny. Mark Corrigan scored 3-7 or 3-8 playing corner forward, and he was just an unbelievable player. And as it turned out, the following weekend, Tullamore played Kinnity in a league match in O'Connor Park, and there must have been an outbreak of bubonic plague in Tullamore, but I ended up corner back marking Mark Corrigan, and it managed to hold him to 1-2, which I think might have been more if Corrigan hadn't gone off injured after 10 minutes. It's one of those. It was one of those. I mean, the man was a genius. But look, you look at that team in the 90s, and they were more skillful than the 80s team. The 80s team were great hurlers as well, but there was a more dogged, committed nature to the game. And the game was different at that stage anyway. But by the 90s, Johnny Dooley is an outstanding player. I loved John Troy. Absolutely loved John Troy for someone of skill and talent. Obviously, I have to give a shout to Kevin Martin, my own clubman. But I'll agree with Brian Whelan. Brian Whelan was just an adornment in any game he played, forwards, backs. There was nothing he didn't do on the field. Just an outstanding player.
Yeah, he'd a Michael Jordan-esque flu game. It's kind of, he is at that level of absolute superstars in the game. Can I just go back to the football? Is there a case that actually, in the point you made about the team in the 80s being the team that breaks the mould for the hurlers, is there any way that you can see Eugene McGee being on Offaly's Mount Rushmore, given that he is the architect of the team that comes along in the 80s, or because they'd already won before that? Who was the manager in the 70s?
Well, it's funny, if the team of 69 that got to the All-Ireland final was managed by Father Tom Scully, who died last week. An incredible man, complications from COVID-19, died just a month short of his 90th birthday. Here's an extraordinary story, but so there was him, and then in the 71-72 team, it's another priest, Father Gilhooly, trained as well by Allo Kelly, Tullamore man, who again was fated for what they did at the time. And yes, you can make a case for Eugene McGee, a Longford man, or for, I suppose, most celebrated in that area, Longford Cavan area. And Eugene McGee is an adopted son of Offaly, but I think the tendency is to cleave towards players and people who've actually done it on the field. And I wouldn't argue for Eugene McGee ahead of either of the other two. Okay,
we'll have an interesting conversation about Hefo whenever it comes to the Dubs. I'm kind of looking forward to, and also not looking forward to.
But he did it on the field as well. Kevin Heffernan did it on the field as well. So he had his career in the 50s as a kind of a mold-breaking footballer at that stage as well. So Hefo had it both ways. Okay, so we'll get to make that case twice. All right, so we've agreement on Wheelahan. We've no agreement on Matt Connor. It's Furlong. We've agreement on Larry. So half and half agreement so far. Will, who is your final person on Mount Rushmore in Offaly?
Yeah, I'm going to put Pat Smullen on here, Ger. Just, I guess, first of all, his achievements in terms of being a 9-time Irish flat champion jockey, the great kind of battles he had for the championship with the likes of Joseph O'Brien and Fran Berry over the last decade and a half as well. Pretty tremendous record, really, at Royal Ascot, including that great success in 2016, which he had with Harzand in the Derby at Epsom as well. You look at other major victories like Rite of Passage back in 2010 and the Ascot Gold Cup. He also had Fascinating Rock in the Champion Stakes back in 2015 as well. Won all of the classics here in Ireland as well, the Derby, the Oaks, the St. Ledger, the 1000 Guineas, won the Tattersalls Gold Cup on multiple occasions across the CV as well. So as flat jockeys in Ireland go, like Pat Smullen has a longevity both about his career and also just a glittering run of success across the CV. You know, he won victories at the Breeders' Cup, he's won at Longchamp before, so he's done it outside of Ireland and Britain as well. I think one of the other reasons that pushes Pat Smullen really into this as well is that, you know, Pat is beloved in Road for a start, and that's really a football area, but yet everyone in Road who's interested in football has also followed Pat Smullen's career throughout all this as well. And you take into account that, you know, Pat was forced very sadly into retirement. We were hoping after his first bout with pancreatic cancer that he might get back into the saddle, but unfortunately in March of last year he made the decision to retire. Very quickly we saw into Champions Weekend at the start of last autumn, they decided to have a fundraiser for Pat Smullen, and he was doing a lot of the pushing and the fundraising himself around cancer trials trials. So far, they've raised nearly €3 million. €2.5 million was raised over the couple of weekends on Champions Weekend as well. So Pat Smullen, a very sound fella on top of a remarkable CV as a rider as well. And I think when you take all those achievements into account, he deserves a place on this Mount Rushmore. It's
a pretty compelling case. All right, Paul?
Oh, this is really tough. My mother's from Rhodes, so this is not going to go well. Even if I could go home at the moment, I don't think I'd even get in the gate, let alone the door. But Pat Smullen, you cannot argue against that list of achievements. He's an extraordinary man, on and off the track. What he has done, those arguments are that Will makes are utterly compelling. But I've come at it from a different angle. In the mid-1990s, I used to work as a reporter for the Leinster Express in the Midlands, Leinster Express and Offaly Express. And in the course of that, I began to report on basketball. And there was a girls' team in Tullamore CBS who went on to win 2 All-Irelands, which brilliant players on the team. People like, I can't remember all their names at this room, but there was Emily Bryan, Susan Flynn, Ciara Quinlan, and Susan Moran. Now, Susan Moran at this time was regularly scoring, coached brilliantly, by the way, by Anne Ganley and other teachers, was scoring 50 points a game in key matches. And at the same time, she was also an international tennis player for Ireland. She goes on, and basketball is the second most popular sport in the world. And this has to matter. So she goes on then, and she goes to America and has a choice of colleges where she could go to. She can go to Boston, you can go to New York, wherever, and she goes to Philly, to St. Joseph's, a Division 1 team. She could have gone to a Division 2 team. She went to a Division 1 team. She goes in there and is so successful that her jersey is retired afterwards, the second jersey ever in the history of that college for that to happen. She is then recruited straight out of college into the women's NBA, plays there, plays brilliantly, goes then and plays professionally in various other leagues, traveling around the place, comes back and is so well regarded that she's taken back as a coach and becomes lead coach back in Joseph. It is an extraordinary career, and the context of this career is and has to be seen to be the very fact that she did this at a time in the mid-1990s when women's sport is not as well regarded as it was now. The opportunities for women to play sport were much lower. The infrastructure in Tullamore, like you'd see Susan Moran in the school grounds in the Sacred Heart practicing repeatedly all of these times. This is a time when there was, in my own town in Tullamore, there was camogie, which was strong, but there was no women's Gaelic football. There was very limited opportunities for girls to play sport relative to what there are now. And she did this. She went from a small town in the Midlands of Ireland to become a leading basketball player in America. And that has to matter.
I think it does, Will.
Yeah, no, look, again, it's one of the things, as Paul mentions, he was running for the Offaly Express at the time. I think I first started working for Midlands Radio in about 2001, 2002. I think one of the first jobs I used to have was ringing Sue on a Saturday afternoon after she'd usually played in the women's NBA on a Thursday night or a Friday, and ringing her just for a conversation about how things were going with New York Liberty. So it was one of those things. She was just an absolute superstar and remains very connected to Ireland as well. She drafted Claire Melia, who was playing with the Portlaoise Panthers, who she knew through her connections back here at home, and has drafted Claire Mealy onto the St. Joseph's first team as well. And Claire is doing remarkably well from Monaster Evans. So she's got a great eye for players as well. Not just I think she's an associate head coach still with Joe's at this stage in Philadelphia, but is also involved in a lot of their international recruitment. So she remains highly regarded. As Paul mentioned, her jersey has been retired. Remarkable the numbers that she ran up. I think she was the top rebounder and point scorer for Joe's across the 4 years of her undergraduate degree and then her graduate degree as well before she went into the women's NBA. And then on top of that, she was the 4th top scorer across America in all divisions. So she was playing in Division 1, but she was still outscoring players in the lower divisions of basketball, in college basketball as well. So I would have absolutely no problem with putting Sue on here. I guess we could propose some kind of compromise maybe on the 4. We put Sue on instead of Pat, and maybe we get Matt Connor on instead of Martin Furlong, and we call it everyone's had a very good day, and we go home with the cuddly toy.
I actually would propose a different solution, given the scale of the achievements of the people of the county that we get a fifth head in all of this. It seems to me that the county's achievements, the genius of its people deserves recognition, and I think in this a special exemption should be made for a smaller county as well that should achieve so much.
Perfect. Yeah, I can see the pitchforks literally with the sods of turf inflamed as we put 4 up, and they're like, no, put the fifth one up,
Not our fault, sure. They could have got Jimmy Barry Murphy onto Cork if Colin Bowie had made the exact same argument last week.
Yeah, but the whole point is there's only 4, so it was JBM or Ring. I think everybody's putting JBM up against Raj, but that wasn't how it was at all. The history of sports series so far with Joe every Tuesday nights, or is it Wednesday nights?
Oh yeah, it's Tuesday nights normally. Sometimes it's Monday nights. And so we come back and we've 3 done. We go back. We come back next week on Monday or Tuesday of next week to talk about the origins of soccer and of rugby in England and how they began to leak into Ireland over the following weeks. It's actually Will took this course in UCD and was an outstanding student on the course, I have to say. So it's been really enjoyable. It's been really enjoyable to do this, and it's because it's, I suppose, the last time I'll teach the course. It's one of those really enjoyable things to do.
Right. How is your lockdown? What pop culture are you binging on?
I have made. I'm again a bit of a Luddite when it comes to these things, but I've made kind of the first tentative steps into Fortnite, which has seen shock and awe displayed around the place now. I've watched a little bit. Well, just got to watch more telly than would ordinarily watch. I'm in a WhatsApp group where there is a DJ, a self-appointed DJ, who is proposing a weekly or nightly song list, an album in old-fashioned terms, which has been very enjoyable as well. And then just reading and actually trying to get a little bit fit, which is challenging. It's
harder than I think it is, and there's also obviously Easter and all the chocolate that comes with that.
The weekend was a lot of weightlifting.
Yeah, exactly. Paul, great stuff. Thanks a million. And I like the way you were buttering up Will, but I think Will is sticking. Are you sticking with Pat Mullen or are you changing? Is Susan getting on?
Well, are we allowed at 4 or 5, Jared?
You're 4. You're allowed 4.
Jared, come on.
No changes. This is like a team of Nathan Murphys ganging up on us. You're allowed 4, Will. Who are they?
All right, okay. Let's put Sue Moore on then. And so what we'll do is we'll have 2 picks each then. So we'll have Martin Furlong, Brian Wheelahan, Sue Moore, and we got Shane Lowry. That's our 4.
Well, so that's a perfect end to this. Lads, thanks a million, and congratulations on sticking your Offaly's Mount Rushmore together. There is the iconic shot of Croghan Hill. Am I saying that right? Is it Croghan Hill?
No, Croghan Hill.
Croghan Hill. And that was taken by James Crombie out by Info last week. Absolutely sensational stuff.